At 25,000 feet above Nazi-controlled Europe, where the air itself tried to kill you, a B-17 flying fortress limped through the sky, ripped apart. Bleeding fuel, its crew half dead. Smoke poured from its engines like black veins in the clouds. The bomber should not have been flying. It should have already fallen in flames. And yet, against every law of war, something even more impossible was about to happen. A German fighter dove from the sun, guns armed, finger on the trigger. One squeeze, just one, and 7 Americans would vanish forever. But instead of firing, the German pilot did something no one had ever seen before. He flew closer, closer than dogfighting distance, close enough to see the faces inside. Then it happened. Metal screamed. Wings tangled. A German fighter slammed directly into the B-17 and somehow, unbelievably, did not fall away. When the bomber finally landed, the enemy aircraft was still inside it. This is not a legend. This is not a myth. This happened, and the reason why will haunt you. The world at war. By late 1943, the sky over Europe had become the deadliest battlefield on Earth. Every day, thousands of American bombers crossed into Germany, carrying the war straight into Hitler's factories, cities, and military heartland. And every day, German pilots rose to meet them with one mission: destroy every bomber before it returned home. The B-17 Flying Fortress was built for survival. 4 engines, heavy armor, and defensive guns pointing in every direction. But survival was never guaranteed. German flak tore wings off like paper. Fighters ripped through bomber formations like wolves attacking wounded prey. If your plane was damaged and fell behind, your chances dropped to nearly zero. Crews knew this. They flew anyway, because turning back meant failure. And failure meant losing the war. The damaged fortress. On December 20th, 1943, a B-17 named Ye Old Pub lifted into the frozen European sky. Inside were young American airmen, most barely in their 20s. They joked during takeoff. They always did. It helped hide the fear. But hours later, over Germany, hell arrived. Anti-aircraft shells exploded around the bomber, ripping through the fuselage. One engine burst into flames. Another sputtered and died. The nose was shredded. The tail gunner was gravely wounded. Blood coated the metal floor. Oxygen leaked into nothingness. The formation pulled away. Ye Old Pub was alone. And in that sky, being alone was a death sentence. The hunter appears. From a nearby airfield, a German ace pilot climbed fast into the clouds. His name was Franz Stiegler, a veteran of countless aerial battles. He had been trained by the legendary Jagdgeschwader units of the Luftwaffe. He had seen bombers explode. He had watched parachutes fail to open. His orders were simple: destroy the bomber. When Stiegler spotted the damaged B-17, he knew this would be easy. The plane was barely holding together. Guns were silent. It was wounded prey. He closed in. But as he lined up his shot, something stopped him. The moment that changed everything. Through the shattered windows of the bomber, Stiegler saw something no enemy pilot expected to see. He saw men trying to save each other. He saw the tail gunner slumped in blood. He saw crew members desperately administering first aid. He saw fear, not hatred, in their eyes. And in that moment, Franz Stiegler remembered something his commander once told him. "If I ever see you shoot a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." What Stiegler was seeing felt the same. This was not combat anymore. This was execution. He could not fire. The impossible decision. Instead of pulling the trigger, Stiegler did something unthinkable. He flew beside the B-17, so close that the American pilot, Charlie Brown, could see the German's face. They locked eyes, enemy to enemy, separated by glass and fate. Brown expected death at any second. Instead, the German pilot raised his hand and motioned. He tried to signal Brown to land, to surrender, to save his crew. Brown shook his head. They couldn't land. Not in Germany. So Stiegler made a choice that would have gotten him executed for treason. He would escort the enemy bomber. The collision. As German anti-aircraft batteries began to track the B-17, Stiegler moved even closer, positioning his fighter between the bomber and the guns, using his own aircraft as a shield. Then turbulence struck. The damaged bomber suddenly lurched. Metal struck metal. The German fighter's wing smashed into the B-17's fuselage. Both planes shook violently. Inside the bomber, the crew screamed, believing this was the end. But instead of breaking apart, the German fighter became jammed inside the bomber's structure. wedged against it by torn metal and twisted wreckage. For a moment, two enemy aircraft flew as one, locked together in the sky, defying physics and war. Somehow, through impossible balance and sheer skill, Stiegler managed to break free without destroying the bomber. His aircraft was damaged, barely controllable. He flew one last time beside the B-17. He saluted. Then he turned away, choosing silence over glory. Behind him, You Old Pub limped onward and crossed into neutral airspace. Against all odds, it survived. The landing. When the B-17 finally touched down at its base, ground crews ran toward it and stopped in shock. Pieces of German aircraft were still embedded in the bomber. Proof. Absolute, undeniable proof. The crew was alive because an enemy pilot chose mercy over orders. But they were told never to speak of it, because in war, kindness is dangerous. The secret kept for decades. For over 40 years, Charlie Brown told no one. He feared that the German pilot had been killed for treason. He feared the story would sound impossible. He feared it would be dismissed as fantasy. But the memory never left him. And neither did the question, who was that pilot? The reunion. In the late 1980s, Brown began searching. He placed ads. He contacted veteran groups. And then a letter arrived. It was from Franz Stiegler. They met. They embraced. Former enemies became lifelong friends. Stiegler told Brown, I did it for the honor. I did it because I saw you as men, not enemies. The deep truth. This story isn't about planes. It's not about war. It's about the moment when a human being refuses to become a monster. In a sky filled with fire, hatred, and death, one man chose mercy. And that choice echoed across decades. जर्मन पायलट फ्रांस स्टिगलर जब अमेरिकन B-17 के बिल्कुल करीब उड़ रहा था, उस वक्त उसके दिमाग में जंग और ऑर्डर से ज्यादा इंसानियत बोल रही थी। नीचे जर्मन फ्लैग गन्स तैयार थे। अगर वो चाहता, बस थोड़ा सा साइड होता और ग्राउंड से गोलियां उस B-17 को टुकड़े टुकड़े कर देती। लेकिन स्टिगलर ने ऐसा नहीं किया। उसने अपना फाइटर प्लेन B-17 के साथ पैरेलल उड़ाया, ताकि जर्मन ग्राउंड गन्स को लगे कि ये बॉम्बर उनका अपना है। यानी वो दुश्मन को शील्ड बनाकर बचा रहा था, जबकि खुद गोली लगने का पूरा खतरा था। B-17 का अंडर अमेरिकन पायलट चार्ली ब्राउन समझ ही नहीं पा रहा था कि हो क्या रहा है। हर सेकंड यूज लगता कि अब गोली चलेगी, अब इंजन फैट जाएगा, अब सब खत्म। मगर गोली कभी नहीं चाली। वो लम्हा जो सब बदल गया। ठंडी हवा, डैमेज्ड इंजन्स और खून से भरा कॉकपिट। इसी दौरान तेज टर्बुलेंस आया। B-17 अचानक हिल गया और जर्मन फाइटर बहुत करीब आ गया। फियर, डैम। जर्मन फाइटर का विंग B-17 के मेटल बॉडी से टकरा गया। हर चीज कांप उठी। क्रू ने समझा अब दोनों प्लेन्स गिर जाएंगे, लेकिन किस्मत ने फिर एक और हैरान कर देने वाला काम किया। जर्मन फाइटर B-17 के साथ फांस गया, जैसे दोनों हवा में एक दूसरे से चिपक गए हों। कुछ सेकंड्स के लिए दुश्मन नहीं रहे, सिर्फ द पायलट्स थे जो जिंदा रहना चाहते थे। स्टिगलर ने पूरी स्किल लगाकर अपना प्लेन अलग किया। अगर उसने गलती की होती, दोनों प्लेन इस पर जाते। जब वो अलग हो गए, स्टिगलर ने एक मर्तबा फिर B-17 की तरफ देखा। उसने प्लेन को गिराया नहीं, गोली नहीं चले, रेडियो पर रिपोर्ट नहीं की। उसने सिर्फ सल्यूट किया, एक फौजी सल्यूट, एक इंसान की तरफ से दूसरे इंसान के लिए। फिर वो पलट गया और चला गया। B-17 की वापसी। अमेरिकन B-17 मुश्किल से न्यूट्रल एयर। क्यों कि जंग में दुश्मन पर रहम कमजोरी समझा जाता है, और जर्मन पायलट के लिए ये बात फांसी का सबब बन सकती थी। इसलिए ये कहानी 40 साल तक खामोश रही। War teaches men how to destroy, but sometimes it reveals who still remembers how to be human. At 25,000 feet above a broken world, two enemies met not as soldiers, but as men with beating hearts and trembling hands. One had the power to kill, the other had already accepted death. But in that silent sky, a single choice was made: mercy instead of murder. No medals were given, no victory was recorded, no headlines were written, yet that moment lived longer than the war itself. Because bombs end battles, but humanity ends hatred. And long after the engines stopped, long after the uniforms were folded away, that one act of mercy proved something timeless.